Zoning Commission. The first order of business is roll call. Do I have to recognize you? I've never seen that before. Huh? Two I've never seen. Do I use mine?
Check, check.
Yeah, there you go. We're all just gonna- Chair Height,
Present.
Commissioner Lang,
Present.
Commissioner Boone, Chair Poland,
Here.
or sorry, Commissioner Poland, you're not chair anymore, Commissioner Saunders,
Here.
Commissioner Earl,
Present.
Commissioner Jordan.
Present.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The next item is the reading of the land acknowledgement statement. I've created my own, but I'll read the one that's in front of me. We acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute, as well as other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection of these first peoples with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken, to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. Thank you. Next will be communications. Anything from Director Grant Penland? Public invited to be heard. Are there
There's nobody
any
signed up.
members of the?
Just one button.
So had I screwed that up?
Yeah.
Did you push two?
These don't do it. He pushed too many buttons.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Well, can I recognize you now? Let me see if that works.
You don't need to. This one.
I just wanted to see. Did work, yes?
Well, this mic is always hot when it turns on.
All right. Now you're on.
That one should work also now.
Yes.
Test.
It
Yes.
wasn't just me. I had help pushing the wrong button.
I don't think these do anything. These don't do anything. You push
All
both
right.
of those.
Good.
You got this.
Next item is approval of the minutes. There are two sets of minutes from January.
Public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did. I moved right over that because I erased it. Public comment. I don't see any members of the public. Maybe. Sure.
Not signed up.
Okay. Is there anybody signed up? Nobody signed up. I will close public comment and move on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes. There were two meetings in January. The first one is January 15th, 2025. There were draft minutes. Comments, motions. I open it up. I'm sorry, I will recognize. God, why do I'm looking at the wrong thing? Commissioner Poland.
Gotta go up on the.
Yeah, I think it's on this touch
Yeah.
screen. There you go.
Commissioner Poland. Why is this not working again?
There you go.
Oh, you have to do two things.
I move approval of the January 15th, 2025 minutes.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? I will recognize Commissioner Boone.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Roll call, vote.
Commissioner Lang,
Aye.
Commissioner Boone,
Aye.
Commissioner Poland,
Yes.
Chair Height,
Aye.
Commissioner Saunders,
Yes.
Commissioner Earl,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan.
Aye.
Chair, that passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. Next is the meeting minutes from January 22nd. Any discussion, motions? Commissioner Poland. Haven't I hit you?
Next.
And then
The
hit the
next.
next.
There you go. I motion that we approve the January 22nd, 2025 minutes.
Is there a second? Commissioner Earl.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote?
Commissioner Lang,
Aye.
Commissioner Boone,
Aye.
Commissioner Poland,
Yes.
Chair Height,
Aye.
Commissioner Saunders?
Yes.
Commissioner Earl?
Yep.
Commissioner Jordan?
Aye.
Chair, that passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. I apologize for the inability to push the right buttons. Next, we're moving on to a public. We don't have any public hearings, but we have other business before us this evening. Specifically, consideration and possible recommendation of approval to City Council of the Transportation Mobility Plan to be presented to us by Phil Greenwald. Phil, I turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Chair. My name is Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Longmont. It wasn't too long ago that I was here before you, and we were talking about this very subject. So I do want to take it to the next step, introduce the plan to you and kind of what we ended up with as far as the policy level plan piece here, and then ask for your recommendation at the end to City Council. So be ready for that. Thank you very much. The agenda for tonight is plan process. Just talk about what we went through and all the different elements that we talked about, kind of from your January meeting. There'll be some redundancy here. I apologize. And then the recommendations, and then the next steps piece. So as we've already shown you before that there was a couple different phases to the timeline here. So I know it's small and kind of hard to read on some of the monitors here, but we did start last winter, winter in 23 actually. So phase one is really getting the existing conditions and all the different pieces that we knew about as far as the transportation network in Longmont, start to establish that vision and goals process. So we did work with members of this commission as well as others. All our boards and commissions that had anything to do with transportation got together in part of a steering committee piece. And so we talked about all these different elements and work with them to get a lot of the information, as well as go out to the public and do some very robust, what we hoped was robust public engagement to capture the feedback on the community's experiences and get them to interact with different maps, and you'll see some of that. Phase two was summer of last year. Draft recommendations for the walking, the biking, the transit, and the driving elements of the plan, as well as starting to prioritize those lists and get an idea of what projects really needed to move into that next phase of being implemented and actually established as far as construction projects for the city. We also did do some public engagement with that as well. We captured the feedback on that draft recommendations piece. We did that again. We just closed that last night at midnight, we think. But some people were able to still get some comments in, which is great. We'll take them. Anything goes. And then right now we're at that point. We're really trying to get to the finish line on this piece, making sure that everybody is in general agreement on those ideals and those policies that have been recommended both at the public policy level and at the city council and the boards and commission level. So we've heard a lot of information to date. And again, that community engagement, you've seen this, you know this, so this is kind of redundant again, but the 1,350 touch points, we had survey responses, we had maps where people were able to put pins or virtual pins in where they could tell us, hey, this is a problem, or we'd like to see improvements here. So those things were all wonderful as far as kind of getting us to the point where we are now with the TMP, or Transportation Mobility Plan. And unfortunately, you can play Where's Waldo with some of these pictures and try to find the Waldo, this guy, in all those pictures, which I got to get that changed in this thing. But anyway, the TMP documents, we tried to send this out. I hope you were able to get to those documents with this link. We have a really wonderful, we think, story map that really summarizes the plan really nicely. If you do want the full plan, the PDF of that plan, that's supposedly available too. So we're hoping that people had access to that and were able to read it. There's a lot in there, over 100 pages, unfortunately, but a lot of it is individual or individual projects and just lining those all out for future consideration. We did break it into its different elements, but please understand that all these elements work together as far as they're all individual and we have to look at them in separate buckets, but we do want to put them together as a system. So this does provide a whole system when you kind of think of them all together. So the goal for walking was fill sidewalk gaps and upgrade sidewalks that are narrow or in poor condition. And the recommendation is really prioritize those sidewalk projects based on community need. And we'll tell you how we kind of went through that. One level of community need was to put these into different tiers. And so we looked at sidewalk projects or pedestrian projects in terms of access to transit. So one of the pieces was, are they on an arterial that are served by transit. So that was kind of the tier 1 level of look. The tier 2 was, are they on other streets like collectors and local streets that have transit? And then tier 3, are they on arterial streets close to key destinations like schools or shopping or parks or public facilities, other public facilities? And then tier 4, other streets, collectors and locals, again, close to key destinations. And then all the other streets are kind of combined. But this is all about trying to, again, get that into the different layers of the transportation system, and how does this work with all the other pieces like bicycling and transit and roadways. So bicycling, the goal was to make bicycling more comfortable, or make biking more comfortable everywhere in Longmont. So just a general goal, right? That seems broad to me, but I love it because it really does talk to the idea of making it comfortable to the point that people will actually use it more. So the recommendation was add new bicycle facilities, improve the comfort of existing facilities, and develop associated standards. So the way we looked at this was to break down the system of bicycling into all its different components, and this is very similar to Envision Longmont and the multimodal transportation improvement plan that already has involved with it. And so what we try to do is look at the system as far as multi-use trails, and then we've got new items that weren't really around or weren't really feasible for Longmont back 8 years ago or 9 years ago when we did Envision Longmont. And that's protected bike lanes weren't really something that that people were doing in the United States at that time. A lot in Europe and a lot in different countries in Asia, but not in North America. Now, much more of a component of the systems that people are building out. You'll see that on Boulder, on Baseline Road, where they've installed kind of those 2 foot high concrete barriers between the traffic, the general purpose traffic, and the bicycling. So that's not all that they are. They're also just any kind of vertical separation between the bicyclists and walkers and vehicular traffic. So that's a protected bike lane. There's elements shown in the plan too, so we can look those up. Also, buffered bike lanes are just extra paint, so nothing more than another strip of paint to buffer that bike lane from cars. Typically, you can also buffer them from parked vehicles as doors are opening. So there's a bunch of different ways you can add buffered lanes. Bike lanes, typically just the one stripe of paint or 2 stripes of paint, basically. And then we get into the neighborhood bikeways, which is more of a shared street experience. Side paths, which are, you'll see those on major roads like Hover, 17th, have those sidewalks, and we call them side paths because they do a little bit more than just act as a sidewalk. They're typically separated from the roadway as well. And then the shoulders on the major highways, typically those are on state highways where you have a shoulder condition. And that's kind of maybe the lowest level that we want to look at, because that really is sharing the space with roadway users. And then future regional connectors as well, as we go outside the city and start to look at how we connect other regions. So transit has the goal of improved transit within Longmont, but we also have the recommendation to increase frequency and coverage of local and regional transit and improve the bus stop experience. So making it more comfortable to actually stand at a bus stop, maybe provide some cover, some shade, some cover from, I won't say snow, but from rain, because cover from snow, it gets a little chilly regardless, like today. So those kind of things we're looking at as well with this plan. We want to continue the operation of microtransit, so that's been really popular. We just went over 10,000 trips since December 9th, so we've provided 10,000 trips to folks throughout the city, which has been wonderful. Upgrade the bus stop amenities, so those are the places where you sit, so you don't have to sit on the curb or in the grass, those kind of things. Have a trash can, maybe a bike rack, those kind of things. And implement the planned local and regional transit recommendations. So you'll see on there a couple different routes that go north up to Fort Collins. One's our rail, hopefully, passenger rail in the future. Hopefully that future is closer than the next decade. So we're looking forward to seeing how that works, especially with the state and the governor really pushing for that kind of transit in this part of the region. So we are on board with that, so to speak. And then also the flex bus that already goes up to Fort Collins. You'll see a little dotted line that goes up toward Lyons. That's actually, there's another planning region north of us that really wants to do a system of transit from Loveland on 34 and from Longmont on 66 and 36 to get up to Rocky Mountain National Park and Estes Park. So we'll certainly be part of that if that's if that's what people want to do. I mean, it's great for our residents as well to get up to Rocky Mountain National Park without having to drive. So, and you'll see some other things on there. You'll see the local routes and what's being proposed in the dashed lines and what's existing in the solid lines. And then some of the solid lines also show some of our bus rapid transit that's coming in 2027. So we wanted to acknowledge that those are not existing, but they are on their way. They have funding and they're coming in 2027. So the other piece of this is the long-term transit about just kind of monitoring our system. Continue with those upgrade of the bus facilities, of course, and make sure that we have people not standing or sitting in and being uncomfortable. But then also check out what's going on with the microtransit and see what kind of ridership we're getting. Check those origins and destinations and how that could maybe lend itself into future fixed route. So we want to be strategic and watch that. And then there's also a Boulder County-wide strategic transit plan that's just been it was just released, and they actually have a consultant on board. So we're excited to kind of move forward with Boulder County's view of transit and how it all connects county-wide. But a lot of it will focus on Longmont, as we're sometimes the first, sometimes the second largest city in the county. So we kind of share that with Boulder. Every now and again we jump ahead of them, and then they jump ahead of us. So we will probably pass them at some point, and that might be for a longer term time than just toggling back and forth. So we'll see how that goes. Roadways, making drivers safer and supportive of all other modes. So the idea here is that the recommendation would focus on safety projects and add capacity only when it improves safety for all modes. So not just adding capacity just to make it easier to drive, but make sure that if we do have bottlenecks in the system, that we're adding capacity only to make it safer, and only when we can make it safer for all modes, and not put anybody at that detriment. And that's hard to do, of course, with walking, because as you widen anything and make it harder to cross, that creates more of a barrier. So we need to be cognizant of that. So here we kind of break down the things into intersection projects and roadway projects. And you'll see that we look at them in different ways, but it really is a multimodal safety intersection enhancement piece. And this is really going to play really well with Vision Zero. So as we start to move forward in Vision Zero, that'll really be the document that takes us to the next step of exactly what should happen at these dots. So here we kind of identify all these different places that need a little help and where there's potentially some issue with safety. But the next step is to get that Vision Zero action plan going, and you'll see that coming online later this year as it rolls out faster and faster here. It's already doing some public outreach components there, so we hope if you want to be involved, you've heard about it. If you do want to be involved, let us know, and we can get that information to you so you can start to attend if you'd like. And you'll see those capacity increases typically on state highways, but also on Hover Street and Clover Basin. But those are all, again, have to be done with the idea that these be done as a multimodal project and not just for one mode or another. I say that, and then I go to bicycle-related roadway projects. So this is the idea that you would lose something from the roadway, like parking or travel lanes, or some element may be lost to accommodate bicycle travel. But that's been the direction of both our council and then the citizens who came out to talk to us. People were adamant that bicycling be made easier in the city. And so we're looking at those different ways to do that. And of course, that would be, again, still cognizant of all modes when we look at that, not just, we wouldn't make it unsafe to do that. And then there's some program goals too, making walking, biking, and transit more accessible and convenient. And the recommendation there is really to supplement the infrastructure with new and continued programs to support multimodal options. So again, you can see that we're really trying to shift the paradigm so that walking, biking, are kind of on the top, transit comes kind of next, and then roadways are that last tier. And what we've really always done is the other way around. You've seen it. We are all very cognizant and aware of what's been going on over the last 100 years in the city, that it's been about the car. And so we've built a lot of lanes, and I think we've done a really good job in accommodating the car over the last 100 years, but it's time to flip it back to not the good old days, but kind of the way it used to be, where we would have streets with all sorts of things that happened in them and not just one mode or another. So just wanted to let you know those pieces as well. And again, that's not from me necessarily. That's from the city council. That's from these boards and commissions. Our steering committee was very adamant about that as well. And the citizens let us know as we had these touch points. So we're trying to reflect what we heard back and what we heard during the Envision Longmont process, not to throw things away from 9 years ago. So understanding that the community has changed, but it hasn't changed that much over the last decade. So we still want to be cognizant and aware of what people had told us. The programs, I really do like to focus on maintenance because that's one of the biggest issues that we have. I mean, even when you're walking around on a day like today and you see that the snow's not always cleared in all the places that you'd like it to be as you walk and slide. So those kind of things really make it important that maintenance is a key feature of this. And as we start to talk about changing the narrative, do we start to plow out bicycle and walkways first and then do roadways? I mean, do we all have cars that can pretty much get through any kind of snow condition, most snow conditions, without having to have the roads completely dry for them to make it? So all things to think about as we're talking about these things. And you'll see the other pieces there, the bike and pedestrian amenities, like secure places to lock our bikes. Maybe they're covered also and have that piece. That's something that kind of came out with when we talked last month. That was pretty clearly made to us. And then the wayfinding and signage, those pieces, just making sure people can get around and get there directly without having to kind of try to figure out the whole system. And I know even when you're from here, you kind of have your routes that you take all the time, but every now and then you have to go somewhere different. And it would be nice to have some indication that you're going to make it there without having to pull up your phone or pull up maps or anything like that. You see the other pieces there. The emergency and evacuation planning, that's pretty clear. Curbside and parking management, that's just the idea of, as we're talking about microtransit and where we drop people off and pick them up, where can that happen that makes sense? Right now, we don't have any real pickup places on Main Street because it's too dangerous to do that. So how could you make that curb more dynamic? E-bike policy, that's another piece where we're seeing more e-bikes sold than e-vehicles. And we're starting to see some danger with that too, with people riding, 28 miles per hour on a sidewalk. So that's something we need to be aware of and watch out for. And I talked a lot about Vision Zero. I'll continue to talk about that because that really is the next step in transportation planning right now. And Safe Routes to School is part of that. Data collection and monitoring, just making sure that we're checking this and making sure that, we're always checking to see where those routes could go, new routes could go, checking with RTD to make sure they tell us where the ridership numbers are and we're getting good data back. All those things come together. And then emerging mobility has been interesting because a lot of folks are like, are you thinking about intelligent transportation systems? Are you thinking about autonomous vehicles? Are you thinking about these traffic signals that work fairly autonomously as well and are AI controlled is a lot of what we're talking about right now. And so people are concerned about that. So we heard concerns that the Sustainability Advisory Board was pretty adamant about AI being one of those things they're a little worried about. So all those things go into this idea of transportation demand management and making sure that we're ready for that next phase. This is a 25-year plan, so we want to be ready for the next 25 years. And I can't tell you, if I couldn't tell you in 2016 about microtransit, I probably can't tell you about the cool stuff that's coming and going to take over our planet in the next 10 years. So who knows what's going to happen, right? Implementation is critical, of course, and really the implementation piece happens at that next phase. And we are doing a lot of it. We already have a capital improvement program, a 5-year CIP that we build to. And so we don't want to offset that. We want to start guiding it in the next, the next iteration and use these programs and these projects to kind of focus that to the next level. But it's already out there. It's already happening. There's also a plan monitoring table that really talks about how this plan is moving forward. So we want to make sure that we are moving forward with this plan. And those things keep going on. We have identified funding sources in the plan as well. So right now we're talking about maybe focusing more on state and regional dollars than federal dollars. Those have been slashed quite severely over the last couple months. So we're now looking at how we can get those state and local resources and help us out. And we use our budget to offset those dollars or leverage the dollars, the smaller dollars we have, into these bigger project dollars. So that's always fun. Again, the top priority is safety, improved biking, and those transit investments. That's what we heard pretty loud and clear from the public. That's what we're going to move forward in this plan, and you hopefully have seen that if you were able to kind of read through that earlier. So we're asking tonight is just requesting your general recommendation for council approval of this TMP. There is pending public comment. There's a bunch of different things going on with it. It's not the final document, as it were, but it is that those policies and those different things that we're asking City Council to adopt at their March 4th meeting. So with that, I turn it over to you for any questions and any comments, and hopefully can answer. Thank you.
Any? I have one, which I raised it, I think, back in January, which is that, as you mentioned, the town's been designed for the last 100 years around the automobile. And if we switch to walking, biking, transit not so much, but walking, biking, that's a complete rebuild of how we've already been built, because it's designed around the automobile. As I think I said before, getting to the grocery store, the hair salon, wherever you're going to go, we're set up to do that by car. Specifically for this commission, we could be helpful or we could be a problem in terms of how we approve projects and plans that come before us, in terms of I'm not so sure the code supports this TIP or this TMP that you've put together. So my question is, what should we be looking at from a municipal perspective of how to support this at the zoning level?
That's a great question, and I think it really falls back onto the idea that we have done a great job building for the automobile. Most places in our town, if you kind of drive them anytime off-peak, are pretty empty. I mean, some of our major streets, 17th Avenue between Hover and Main Street is one example where I always kind of point people to just drive it at any time besides maybe the peak of the peak rush hour. And how do we reallocate some of those spaces where we can? And that's just my kind of blended example of, there's an idea of to look at streets kind of
Right, but between Main and Hover, it's kind of a desert in terms of
right,
where people can get things done.
right.
You have to go to either end of those, and
Right,
that's 2 miles apart.
Yeah. So I think that your idea of how this commission works within the plan, I didn't really go through it too much in the funding piece, but there is a whole section in the funding piece about how do we lean on the development community to help us build the infrastructure that's needed. So when we put lines on a map that say this is going to be a buffered or a protected bike lane, we need to make sure that the development community is on board with those improvements in front of their development, but also critically making it a connected system. So it's not just a piece that's in front of a property. How do we work together with them as the city and say, we recognize this development's coming online soon. How do we connect the rest of it? Or how do we work with the developer to provide more connectivity through the system, both walking and biking? And then if there's transit amenities, are they on the hook or not? We need to make those decisions, and that has to be part of the code piece that we talk about and that'll be in the design standards and those different things too. So this plan will focus on getting some of those design standards done as well. So you'll probably see elements of this plan, continuing for the next decade for sure.
Is it a deliberate choice to adopt this plan and then hope that the rest of the code can catch up? I mean, it would be brilliant, maybe, at one level.
Well, that's exactly what
top.
Envision Zero, boy, been a long day, I guess. Envision Longmont really did kind of set the policy pieces in motion. As you'll recall, I think a number of folks were here when we did that. And so that really got the policy pieces going and the land use and the different pieces with the transportation system. But then we went into the finer detail of the code and started going through the code and making adjustments there. So it does kind of lead the way. It's kind of the icebreaker, if you will, and then we kind of get behind it with all the other amendments after we kind of build that policy and get that general agreement from boards, commissions, and ultimately council that that's the direction we want to go. And then we fill it in with the different policies that make those things happen. So I've glossed over a lot of this, but there's a lot of detail in there that, getting to that next step in implementation, all those pieces are part of those as well.
Okay. You've envisioned it. I will recognize, who is seat 6? Commissioner Saunders, would you?
I think Commissioner Polling was first. Do you mind?
Next on. Next on.
Next on is
Commissioner Saunders.
Saunders.
I am.
You were next on?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Height. Okay. So my understanding, thank you for presenting, Phil. And my understanding is this recommendation that you're asking from planning and zoning is more towards the concepts of the transportation mobility plan, correct?
Right, the
Okay.
general, yeah, that's
Yes.
perfectly said. You said it perfect.
Oh, thank you. Well, perfectly put together, and I appreciate the flip of having sort of, if you look at it as a triangle for our priorities, looking at transportation and flipping it. And I think this is an exciting time to be a part of this. And thank you, Commissioner Height, for your comments. They sort of wrapped into mine, so that's why I jumped on the microphone about how Planning and Zoning Commission plays a role in that, in supporting these concepts. I'm in favor of them. And so I went through and looked at this piece. It's the Longmont Transportation Policy Charter. That's like, it's in the first 3 pages. And it's the Longmont Transportation Policy Charter, and it pulls up this document. And so it has the vision. Longmont has safe, comfortable, and reliable transportation system that prioritizes people walking, rolling, biking, and taking transit to reduce the dependency of single occupancy vehicles. And that's then seen in the beginning of the transportation plan. And then, so my question is, where did this charter come from? Is it from the municipal code? Is it from Envision Longmont? Is it part of the transportation plan sort of guiding? This is, because then the neat thing is that you have this piece where it has the policy, and it's similarly formatted to Envision Longmont. Like, here's our goals. These are how we're going to implement them. And you can see in that second policy that Longmont implements a connected network of low stress on and off-street bicycle facilities, but prioritizing investments in areas of inequity. And I think that's what you're sort of hitting at for applicants coming to Planning and Zoning Commission, and how we can make those connections to those goals. That was really packed in there, so sorry.
That's part of
Yeah.
it. Going back to the charter, that's really something that was developed so we could, not quite an executive summary, but something that anybody could grab onto and just understand, where's the city of Longmont coming from as far as transportation planning, transportation policy. So that was something that we were hoping to be able to give to anybody who had that question, whether they're new Planning and Zoning Commission members or if they're new council members. We could say, this is kind of where we've been. You can certainly change it in the future, but this is how we kind of see it, and this is what this plan is kind of built around. So those kind of things. But going to your point of some of the inequity pieces too, just making sure that we are looking at projects, and again, as we have development come in, if the project doesn't have good connections to the rest of the community, we need to figure out as a city how we make those connections work. And we're using this document to identify, once we have something that comes in and starts the process, how do we finish it up and make sure, not finish it, but get to the next stage and make those connections even broader. So we're not looking at it as just in front of the property, but we're looking at it more of a corridor base.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, that inequity part. It goes to the socioeconomic statuses, and I think as a driving force, I think that's important. Nowhere can I find that having a car is a right, and that becomes, and I have 3 kids, and somehow they think that's a right, but I keep explaining to them what a privilege that is. But it really makes a difference on how you get to work and how your lifestyle is. So I'm excited to see this flip, and I am looking forward to seeing how these implementation pieces come together to Chair Height's point of having the plan come together and then the code reflect these intentions of the citizens who have come to the meetings, to the impact meetings, and given their insight of what they want the city of Longmont to look like in city council. So I'm in favor of recommending these concepts as they are to city council. And that wraps up my, wait, let me just check. Oh, no, sorry, there's one more. I thought my Post-it was done. So sorry. I did want to ask one question quickly about the Transportation Demand Management, TDM. It was referenced in there, and I forget where it's referenced, but that's, you're understanding, that's a federal program, Transportation Demand Management. So that seems like that is where some of the criteria comes from for sort of flipping this idea of not maximizing travel choices versus it. I guess it used to be tied to maybe clean air. Am I striking any bells with you at all? That's just
Well,
what I looked up on the
clean air,
internet.
Yeah. Clean air is definitely part of it, but transportation demand management has been a kind of an idea for as long as I've been in the business,
Okay.
which
That's what I
you can
thought.
tell it's been a long time.
5 minutes.
But so there's always been the idea of we can't build ourselves out of congestion. We can't build our way out of congestion, I should say. And so how do you use, again, when we go back to the idea of not all roads are being used to their maximum capacity, right? So how can we better use those roadways, or how can we incentivize people to try different modes, especially like transit, to Denver or to Boulder, or even within our own city, because it might be easier or it might be less stressful. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at. But the transportation demand management is a lot of education pieces, and then it's a lot of incentive programs to get people, like an eco pass or a free bus pass. We did that with the local buses where we made them all free.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
not many people know that, unfortunately, so I'll
yeah.
say it here in a public setting that our local buses, the 300 series, are free. And so we've done that to incentivize people to try it out, take away that cost element. And so those are all TDM strategies. So TDM is very broad.
Yeah.
It's basically not building, but getting people to try to change their choice of how, when, and where they travel.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that feedback. So I'm just trying to lock into where those incentives are, those thresholds are, and how we not just maximize maybe those transit areas. Is, having 14 different ways of mode of access on Main
Right.
Street isn't necessarily the best plan, but what matrices they're maybe headed towards. Like, are we working for clean air in this street? Are we working for clean water along the Greenway? Just some sort of, numbers oriented, and that may be coming later after the concepts get approved.
I think what you are talking about is maybe the next level of really trying to measure those pieces. And so there's a lot of, again, not in this level of plan, but if you get into the PDF, the actual document, there's some very measurable things that we try to put into our indicators report that is done by our sustainability group, so we can actually measure success or failure.
Yeah.
So we need to measure those things and just kind of keep us on a report card of some sort of how we're doing on these different measures. So if we do have to tweak things, we need to figure out what happens. And it all goes back to not just air quality, but just that kind of congestion relief and all those different pieces.
Do you see that being sort of implemented in like the traffic study? How we're looking at D level, F level, like maybe that's where some of those measurements are taken into account, like, oh, there's only a C level of clean air on this street and we really want it to be at a B level, so we need to reduce, carbon emitting.
Remember, those are two different
whatever.
things when you're looking at traffic
No, I
report,
know,
right?
but like
Because-
maybe going forward, like
Yeah.
that's how we're maybe gonna be able to work with applicants as they're coming forward
Right.
and fitting their projects into the compatibility of the site.
Well, one thing that we're looking at and is listed in this plan document is, do you have transportation demand management like requirements? So as somebody comes in and says, hey, I don't want to do any parking, and we have the new parking code that says, hey, you don't have to provide any minimum number. We have a maximum threshold, but hey, you're going to impact this neighborhood. We can clearly see that you're going to do that. So how are you going to incentivize the people that live in your unit to not maybe drive as much or not own a vehicle necessarily? Do we get into the places of free passes for the other buses or to the microtransit system, or do you provide better bicycle parking or bicycle access to greenways, those kind of things? So that might be the next step that you definitely hear about. That'll definitely come through this group as far as anything that happens on that level. So you'll need to hear about that and understand and consider that as an option. But that's something that's being pushed regionally, and we're getting some pressure now to adopt some of those standards as well. So you'll see some of those pieces coming in probably the near future. But that'll be part of this. We'll talk about it as part of this TMP, that there was recommendations to look at this and consider it. But we'll give you more details, obviously, when it comes forward. Not written at all, not even, we're taking from other communities at this point. So I'm just paraphrasing what other communities have done. But that might be the next step that we need to take as a community.
Well, I'm looking forward to those, Phil, and I appreciate you being at the head of this. I think it's been a long time coming, and we can't ask for a better person heading this up.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Poland.
Phil, getting back to some of the stuff that Chairman Height was talking about, how this affects us as we're going through our various duties. It seems to me this is kind of like what happened with the electrification. The city passed a thing saying we want to move towards electrification, but there's nothing in the code to really support that, and we're kind of caught in a limbo, knowing kind of where the city wants to go, but having a municipal code that really didn't give us an option for that. I'm seeing this kind of the same thing. I hear you saying that we want to emphasize walkability and bikeability and kind of start really emphasizing that. But I would like to see some actual changes then to the code that would help us be able to make our decisions and found our decisions on the code. Let's take, for example, drive-throughs. It's been contentious with the commission over the last couple of times about drive-throughs, and that seems to go against. I mean, drive-throughs encourage cars. There's a lot of people out there who want drive-throughs, but it seems to be kind of antithesis to what the city's trying to get at. So what I would like to see is, following this, if there's some code updates that can be done to help our job and help give us a foundation to put some of our decisions against. And rather than it just being, I feel that this isn't, I'd love to be able to go to the code and find something in the code that I can hang my hat on. So that's just my comments about this. I love the report. I'm for it. I just would like to see a follow-up and seeing if it's something that has to come from us. Are you going to look for recommendations from us, or maybe some options from us of what we'd like to see changed in the code, or is that going to be coming from the city and coming to us if there are going to be changes?
Well, if I can just also kind of address your initial piece of that comment, because it's just sticking in my head, that that analogy you made of electrifying the city. I'm not going to think too much about where that came from or how that started, but I do know that in going out to the public, we heard a lot about people wanting to have safer bicycling and safer walking. So we are just taking that kind of, I'll say, groundswell of support of those different things and trying to take them up to city council as, here's some things your constituents have said to us, and here's some things, we have a lot of that documented in what we've done as far as this planning process goes. So we heard it from the public that they want that. So we certainly agree at some level that that's a good thing, and we're trying to move it forward as staff, but only because of what we've heard from both the policy. This whole thing started with the council direction. So we're just trying to take that and move it forward. So we're hoping that that kind of covers a lot of the policy pieces that are part of this plan. And then as we move into that next level, as you said, to give you guys some teeth when you're actually talking about these projects when they come forward, and you can actually say, hey, this doesn't meet code or this does meet code in those different ways. That'll kind of have to be that next step piece. And I think you're right. It is kind of that next piece of, we're kind of ahead a little bit on the policy pieces of this. So we just wanted to make sure that the policy is what people agree to in the city, and all the boards and commissions talking to you as well, to figure out if this policy level, that's an agreement, and then move on to that next level of, hey, if people are saying that this is what they want and they agreed to this plan, how do we take that plan and move it into action as far as a code amendment? So we are talking about bicycle parking as part of that. We're talking about changing those standards, the design standards that we've talked about. But also, if we want to take on the idea of, and I know you've got some other programs or conversations, I guess, with drive-throughs. So we'll be very interested to hear what your thoughts are on how we as staff should move forward with looking at drive-throughs. Because as you just said, they're important to many people. We learned a lot during the pandemic of how critical drive-throughs can be for something that we never really planned on. And so how do we incorporate them, but maybe start to wean off of those a little bit? So we'll be excited to hear from this group on what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, thank you. Also, a comment for transportation on demand. I think what you really need to look for is convenience for people. Right now, living on the far east side, for me, it's not convenient. I'd love to be able to take a free bus and take it downtown or take it over to the west side. But if it's going to be a 15, 20-minute walk for me just to get to a stop, and if it stops at 6 o'clock or only goes, if you can make it somehow more convenient so that more people can actually make use of it and find it useful, I think that's if that to me would be something that may drive more people taking advantage of it.
I'll just throw in another plug for our microtransit ride Longmont,
Yeah.
$2 a ride. So it's people are trying it out. So we appreciate all those places where you don't have great access to transit. This microtransit model is really filling in some of those gaps, and we'll get you to the bus stops as well. But I understand your issue. I have the same issue where I live, so it's.
Commissioner Jordan. Hold on.
Oh, thank you. Phil, this is great to see as far as I guess a document of intent. But I'll echo Commissioner Poland and Chair Height in terms of I'd love to see some teeth follow this with the code. And I just kind of build on that just a little bit on the comment that Chair Height said about, like 17th Main kind of being a desert as far as the transportation corridor. I'd love to see some somebody wants to do a West Side Tavern in their house today, and encourage some local businesses that'd be a new neighborhood hotspot. I don't know how doable that would be, but I mean I understand that's out of the scope of transportation. But to me, that's one way where the planning and zoning code would work in conjunction with it to create new walkable destinations. So you don't have to get out, 5 miles out of your neighborhood to go anywhere of interest. But the comments I had on the some of the document that's there, the PPI, I guess the pedestrian priority index, it looks like we're creating sort of a schema of road types or corridor types. Do we anticipate that those will sort of follow on with additional kind of code specific to how they are categorized, as opposed to just being a prioritization of where we're doing projects?
I think that is the next step. Again, once the policy is set with this document, then we can move on to the next step of now how do we implement that? How do we make this real, especially on these critical corridors? And there are other maps too that show where we have 0 car households and the income levels. All those different pieces are put together to build some pieces where we know we need to do projects initially or first. So we're looking at the equity piece as far as this goes as well. So there's a couple of things that are happening at different layers, but that first one is that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 level that you mentioned, and how do we get that then into a code?
Yeah.
So we need to build it, approve it first, and then we can kind of get to that next level of how do we get this into a code piece. And then for your land use pieces, I mean, we are looking at Envision Longmont 2.0. So that's coming next year, I believe, in 2026-ish, hopefully. Yeah, so Grant will get to talk with the council on that at the retreat, and we'll find out a little bit more about where that is.
Okay.
And so that'll have to mix in. So when they're looking at the land use, excuse me, pieces, they'll have to marry it back to the TMP piece that
Yeah.
we're talking about now. We're kind of doing them out of order. We did that huge effort in 2016 to do all of it at the same time. Now we need to really move forward with the transportation element of that. And then we'll have to catch up with the land use piece. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts here, as was mentioned earlier.
Okay.
But we're hoping that we can keep on top of it. So.
Okay, I think that answers that question for me. One more comment about PPI, and I think this is kind of like the bicycle rack proportion compared to parking spot conversation we had at a recent. It looked like it was based off of maybe road usage. So in other words, I maybe I didn't interpret that correctly, but a lot of our trips today, the data we probably have is vehicle traffic. Do we have any good data about pedestrian traffic? So in other words, if we're prioritizing projects for pedestrian travel or bike travel, I could see some of those corridors might be very different than auto corridors. In fact, probably should be, so we can reduce opportunities for conflict there.
That's been one of the big discoveries in this whole process. Is we do a wonderful job in counting cars. We do a terrible job counting people. So that's one of the elements of the next steps in this too, is how do we count people on trails or on side paths, sidewalks? Are they walking? Are they bicycling? How do we come up with those things? The best we've done is volunteers on
Yes.
paths. Yeah, exactly. And so, but we're getting more automated, and I think it makes some people a little upset with the city that we do use cameras, and you can really fast forward and get a pretty good pedestrian count. It's almost like listening to a podcast at double speed, right? You can really get through it quickly and make your counts. So we've been doing some of that, but we need to do a lot more of it and make it anonymous so that people don't feel like they're watching me. We used to have like those little infrared counters. So just as you crossed it, we would count on trails, but we never knew how many people were walking, how many people were rolling, and how were they rolling. So all things that we need to do better.
Okay. Just a couple more comments / questions. I looked at the plan monitoring side, and the way I read that in the longer form is that maybe this is like your intent. We're not sure exactly on the metrics just yet. I don't know if that's set in stone, but I was surprised to see that we had for some metrics, and I can't recall exactly the measurement, but like we had that 85th percentile of vehicle trips, but there were no metrics relating to vehicle and pedestrian crashes or vehicle and bicycle crashes. And is that going to be something that's going to be later on with Vision Zero, or should that be added to this?
It'll be added to this via Vision Zero.
Okay.
So exactly your point of Vision Zero is going to capture that much better. We actually have some very good crash data as far as how many pedestrians, how many bicycles are involved in crashes on a yearly basis. And so we'll just continue to monitor that and make sure. But what we need to do at the next step in Vision Zero, we'll do this, is look at the very cause of what was the element within that crash. I mean, you see a crash and you see it by type, but you don't see all the elements of that crash. So we need to take a deeper look into, I don't want to say cause and effect, but I will, but the cause and effect piece of that, so that we can take out that element that causes that. And it's usually just kind of allowing unrestricted turning.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid that the answer may be that at a lot of these places we're going to have to start restricting turns, right turns and left turns. So those have been pretty automatic as far as cutting down our fatality rates at intersections.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions I had. I think this is a great direction. I look forward to see how it impacts code as well. So.
Thanks. Commissioner Earl.
Phil, thank you for all of this. This is awesome, both the kind of full written plan and the website. I'm geeking out about the website and the ArcGIS maps that you have in there. So one question, so I don't repeat what other commissioners have asked, are you planning to, as you start implementing this, to have similar maps that kind of track progress and make it so it's accessible for folks to see, this is phase 1, 2, how it fits into the CIP, et cetera?
That's exactly it. We want to build a dashboard system out of this and be very clear with the public on what's being planned, estimate that construction time as closely as we possibly can with the information that we have, but make it very clear to people on kind of what projects are happening and when they're coming next, so that people can get involved if they need to or if they want to. And before being, we don't want anybody to be surprised. And I think you hear this more than any commission or board that's out there, is there's always an element of surprise. And so we're really trying to take away a lot of that with this dashboard idea and make sure people are tracking what we're tracking, and we're all seeing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, the maps as they exist showing that future state are great, because you literally zoom into your neighborhood, click on the street, and tells you everything about it. So that's awesome. One question it did spur for me, though, you have a number of segments on here of either new or realigned roadways, or just broadly infrastructure realignments, but not all of the ones that are in Envision Longmont. And the ones that do exist point back to Envision Longmont. So I'm specifically, there may be others here, but I'm noticing like Pace between 3rd and Ken Pratt is in Envision Longmont, but doesn't exist in the Transportation Master Plan. But things like Nelson, 9th do. Is that deliberate? How should we think about that link to Envision Longmont?
Yeah, this update included a lot of elements of reality base. And so we took a couple of these things, and even though we were trying to be pretty insightful by including some roads back in 2016, what we've been told in that 9-year span is there's no way this road's ever going to be built by the city of Longmont. We're not going to be able to put money into some of these roads, and they just don't make sense as far as the geography involved and the different elements of infrastructure that's underneath those roadways. So when we start to talk about crossing ditches and moving water lines and sewer lines and the topography that's out there that precludes us from really building that specific road that you mentioned, there's just been a change of our engineers, quite frankly. And so the new group of engineers that are here now are saying that that should never have been on our plan. So let's make sure it comes off, because we don't want to tell people it's coming if we really don't think it can be built.
So in other words, the Envision Longmont 2026 update is likely to reflect closer to what's in the TMP
Yes.
than 2016 from that perspective.
Right, for
Okay.
those roadways, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll use that information.
Great. Thank you.
More? Commissioner Lang? Come on.
There we go. Thanks. Thank you, Chair Height.
That was perfect, though.
Thanks, Phil. Just kind of, there's so many modes of travel covered in this plan, which is great. You know, it's people need choices to get from one side of town to the other for recreation or errands or whatnot. Are there, from your perspective, are there different modes that are prioritized over others in this plan? You know, biking versus microtransit versus taking a bus. Would it be, if there is some sort of prioritizing there, would it have to do with what's the safest, what's the most efficient, what's the most affordable for a user, you know, or is it just kind of giving people as many choices as you can think of to just get from point A to B?
Well, I think to answer that is just to say that the overlying comments that we've been, or the underlying comments we've been getting from this whole time is, I can certainly drive wherever I want to drive, but it's getting more and more congested. So the idea is not putting, I mean, we are talking about flipping the script and putting more resources in the next 25 years at least into the walking, biking, and transit pieces of this, but just kind of even it out a little bit. It won't even come close to really evening it out as much as we would like, but we're just trying to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more comfortable and safer to do these other types of getting around, just so if you don't have the choices, you'll have something to kind of lean on as far as other options. Unfortunately, the option today is to basically 90% of the time anyway is to get in your car and drive. Mm-hmm. And so we're just trying to make it a little easier. I think that's the what we've heard from the citizens and from the city council is give us these other options so that we can make those choices. But it's really about what's the best tool in the toolbox, right? So on a day like today, let's make sure that the roads are clear and people can get there. If they want a bicycle, yes, but it was pretty brutal this morning, right? So a lot of people were taking their car, or they were working from home. I mean, that's another option that we haven't really been talking about, as we've really seen this great shift, and that's a transportation demand management strategy, is work at home. And that makes it so we can not have to build more lanes. So we're looking at all the options that can keep the city the way we moved here or grew up here, keep it the way, that small town character, all the things that really made it worth it for us to move here, keep those things going so that we don't have to make Main Street in the downtown 6 or 8 lanes, right?
Yeah.
And take out beautiful historic buildings that have been there for, 151 years or 2 years now. And so those kind of pieces, I think we're listening to folks who just don't want to change the character of this town as much. And so obviously building, bypasses and different things like that change the character of this town. We've always had those elements as part of the idea, but if we can give more choices and make it easier for people to get to Fort Collins or Denver or Boulder or Estes Park and take a bus instead of having to drive, leave that car in the garage, or not make it so you don't have to buy another car, a second
Right.
car, or even a first car. So we're just trying to keep it open. And people are talking a lot about expensive, how expensive it is just to own a home or even rent an apartment. So all those things you hear on a monthly basis, or even more probably, we can solve some of that, not really completely solve it, but we can solve some of those issues by eliminating that need to always have to own and maintain and drive, put gas into a car, or even electricity into a car that wears down over time and has to have insurance and all those different costs. So we're just trying to open up the options, I
Okay.
think. I mean, that's the bigger thing.
Okay, and then last question on the recommended bikeways project list. That's a pretty comprehensive list, which is great. Speaking from a guy who likes to ride his bike, but and I know this isn't your call, but what do you think the likelihood is of a bunch of these actually happening?
Well, there's an element in the plan. I don't know if it was kind of, it's hidden away a little bit, but it's kind of one in the back, and it talks about a fiscally constrained element of the plan. And we don't put that fiscal constraint on anything else except for bikeways. And so we know we think we can spend about $2 million a year on bikeways. And so that's one of the elements of the plan is, let's make sure we're always putting about $2 million a year into bicycle facilities. So we think we can get through that whole list in 25 years. And it's not going to happen, priority 1 isn't going to happen first, and priority 2 is not going to happen second, likely. But it'll be a combination of how do those different things that are high priority get into the capital improvement program so we can build them. And then how do we move on other ones of them that are more expensive? How do we get grant funding to pay for 80% of that cost, so we, as with our city budget, doesn't have to pay the 100% cost of that more expensive project. So it's all going to kind of hopefully come together at different levels, but it's going to take a lot of monitoring and tracking. So we're going to have to be very upfront, and as the public sees this, give the public the opportunity to comment and say, this is my most important thing on that list. Like, you can say what your highest priority is. We'll share that with Amy's and figure out who, how that kind of rises to the top, and making sure that you can track it as it goes through all these different budget priorities that we have with the city.
Okay.
So I can't
thanks.
really say, I want to say that we can get them all done in 25 years. I think that is doable, but a lot of things have to come. It's not that we have the budget to do all those projects in 25 years. It's that we have the budget to leverage for dollars to get those done in 25 years.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
we are working with grants, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Boone, let's see if this works.
Got her.
Takes 2 pushes.
It worked. Thank you, Chair Hyde.
The 2 pushes turned you on too, huh?
Thank you, Phil. The report was very extensive and falls right in line with what we should be thinking about, in my opinion. And I think in most of our opinions. The only problem I see from a commission standpoint is when projects come through, and we can have these visions in the back of our head as to what's happening, but without some clear code amendments, again, we won't have the teeth. And and I really don't want to wait for 2 years for, the end of 2026 when we might have the updates to Envision Longmont. But I think it might be worth thinking about in the planning department when a project is coming to us to not only have the traffic study, but to have any little tidbits that you might know about the road in front of this project that's going to happen in the next 2 years. There's lots of projects on your list here, and more than we can keep track of. And that would be a good piece of information that could just be easily summarized to come to us when we're looking at specific projects.
Well, I see Grant nodding, so I know he's taking these notes as well as I am, so we will make sure that happens. And again, if we can do anything with this dashboard to make it more transparent to you and share that information up and have that in the planner's hands as they come before you as well, to be able to share that. We have a transportation staff too that's always kind of sitting in the back row there, ready to chat with you about these items as well. So we should know that.
And I'm certainly not asking for, the 100-page traffic study like we're getting on some of these projects, but just some little bit of information. If it's in a neighborhood where the street in front of the project is not going to happen, the improvements aren't going to happen for 15 years, we maybe don't even need to consider that as part of the project review. And that would just be good to know.
We will work on that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all, commissioners. We've all spoken. I'm going to recognize Commissioner Poland again.
I would like a motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission formally recommend the general concepts and intent of the 2025 Transportation Mobility Plan to City Council for adoption.
And I will second that. Does anybody want to? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder, but I did. Is there more comment, questioning, anything more we'd want to talk about? All right. Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you, Chair Height. I wanted to offer a comment for discussion, if I may, based on the comments from my fellow commissioners, as a potential friendly amendment to the motion that we would also like to request appropriate code updates to follow so that P&Z can support the TMP concepts as soon as possible, giving us a little more teeth maybe sooner rather than later, and letting council know that we support and we would like to, for lack of a better word, have some teeth as soon as possible. Do you want me to read that again?
I think I understand it. What I want to do briefly, though, is defer to Phil Greenwald as to whether or not that would be helpful to him or a hindrance. Because what I think I heard Phil saying is that down the road, they're anticipating code amendments.
Yes.
If we're upfront and facial about it now, is that a problem for you?
No,
Okay.
that's fine. That works. Yeah.
All right. Then
Does it help or hinder?
Well, when I go to city council, I will be saying all our boards and commissions, hopefully, recommend approval or adoption of this transportation mobility plan. The piece that will be the caveat is I will add that Planning and Zoning Commission specifically stated this piece. So we will add that. It's not a huge deal, so I'm not thinking it's too much of a hindrance, but it does add to the, okay, now, it could open up that can of worms for council of, okay, exactly what are you going to do and how's this going to work? And we don't know at this point. We are really trying to do the umbrella piece and get that through first, and then get to this more specific or specificity piece. But however you want to do it is fine, because you're making the recommendation, so.
I prefer your way, Phil, as long as you're, making it known that you're reflecting all of the commissioners', it seems, desire to move forward and support the concepts. 2 years is quite a bit of time, and not everyone will still be here. So I'm happy I didn't move for that amendment. I was just up for discussion, so it can be.
Don't know that you can, but I'm going to recognize Commissioner Poland again.
Yes, since this is a recorded meeting and the city council gets the minutes from this meeting as part of their packet, I don't think that's necessary. I think that our intent is clearly known now. Phil knows our intent, and he will pass that intent on. So, and since it is the general concepts and the intent is what we're recommending, I think we're okay without going to asking specifically. It is known that, yes, the sooner the better for us so that we can put teeth behind this.
So I am interpreting Commissioner Poland's response to be that he, though appreciative of, is not going to modify his motion. So the motion that's on the table, I'm proposing be voted upon. With that, recording secretary, shall we take a voice vote?
Commissioner Lang?
Aye.
Commissioner Boone? Commissioner Poland?
Yes.
Chair Height?
Aye.
Commissioner Saunders?
Yes.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan?
Aye.
Chair, that passes 7-0.
Phil, thank you very much. I don't know that we're presenting anything directly to City Council. I'm assuming maybe something comes forward. But trust that you will
We will do that on
take our
March
vote to
4th.
them. Thank
March
you.
4th. Thank you. Yes,
March 4th.
yes.
I
So
appreciate
appreciate your time. Thank you for your recommendation. Much
Thank you.
appreciated. Thank you.
Next is the final opportunity for the public to come and speak. Is there anyone who cares to come on up, chat with us? Seeing no one, moving next to, are there any items from the commission that might want to be presented? Commissioner Earl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief here, but for my commissioners, I would like to ultimately here make a motion that we add an agenda item to a future agenda to discuss a recommendation to council for a code change. Specifically, table 1404020, which is table of approved uses. I expect you all have this memorized. Very simple change here. Under residential single-family housing, the only thing that is permitted is dwelling single-family detached. What I am suggesting is to allow, as a permitted use, dwelling single-family attached, effectively, duplexes, triplexes, etc. No change to definitions, no change to underlying requirements for approvals or anything else, but it allows us to, basically expand some of those attached dwellings into other residential zones. Would allow us to do some kind of gentle density improvements, address some of the missing middle housing that I think we're all hearing pretty loudly and council is hearing loudly doesn't exist right now in the community. Allow some of our homeowners to age in place or be able to take some value out of their home. Recognize it needs a full hearing and a lot more discussion, but ultimately we wanted to make the motion to at least add it to an agenda for future discussion. And happy to, if anyone wants to talk about it more, great. Otherwise, I'll at least make the motion to put it on there for the future.
One thing before you move, I would like to solicit Director Penland's position on how, I haven't seen this happen before, where the commission sua sponte comes up with its own code amendment proposals. How does that work? I mean, normally we have technical expertise thrown towards us. If we want to develop that technical expertise, because I'm assuming that there are some issues that would need to be looked at as to how that would happen, how many properties are we looking at, et cetera. is that something that's amenable to the planning staff?
Through the chair and commissioners, absolutely. And I think you did describe how I think we would envision that playing out. If there was a specific recommendation, staff would evaluate, have further dialogue with the commission, walk through some options before ultimately a specific, code amendment recommendation landed in front of council. There may be a need to even have further research, et cetera, before a ordinance went in front of council. But I would foresee that playing out in that fashion. And yes, we would be amenable to exploring that.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none. Commissioner Earl, would you like to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we add a discussion to a future agenda on amending the table of allowed uses for dwelling single-family attached within residential single-family zoning.
Would anyone care a second? I will recognize Commissioner Jordan.
I second.
Thank you. More comment? Discussion? Commissioner Saunders.
I think I have a question. So about putting items on our future agenda, is this a process? Are we going to have it this formal with motions, or can it be more informal that can we look at such and such agenda? Is that how we've already done it before, where we just put our request in? Does it need to be a formal motion?
Through the chair, Commissioner Member, I think I followed your question. I did correspond with our legal counsel, and his opinion was that it would be appropriate to make a formal motion so that then staff could put on the agenda the topic of discussion, and then again, staff could provide additional input, and there could be open in a public forum discussion amongst the commission members. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so if I had an agenda item that I wanted to discuss, I would make a motion and second, and we would vote on it, not an informal request, a formal request.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Poland.
Yes, I believe as precedent for that was when we initially did the land acknowledgement statement. I believe Commissioner Lukash made a motion that we take a look at. I believe it was actually a motion that she did that we look at it in a future meeting, if I remember right. It was a couple years ago, but the initial one, not putting it in the agenda, but when she initially made it like 2 years ago. I think it was a motion that said we would like the planning department to present to us in a future meeting.
Certainly, I will re-recognize Commissioner Saunders.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Poland. Sorry, it's too close. I was thinking about some of the other agenda items that we had earlier this year. Was that because we sort of did that at the first meeting and we just threw out a bunch of ideas, like the electric bikes, and is that different somehow? Am I missing
I
something?
think we voted on those. one by
Oh,
one.
no, we didn't vote on, yeah, we just kind of put a list together. So that's why I'm just trying to figure out where the different, because I have stuff too. Like, but I don't know if I want to do an official motion for it, just like, can we bring this up? Can we research this and bring this up? But you're saying our counselor, who's not here at the moment, prefers a motion for these items.
And I might clarify, again, through the chair, commission member, I believe the others were just topics of discussion related to, again, bringing more information back to the commission. In this case, there's a specific motion to propose an amendment to the code, which is, I think, the differentiation here. Again, from legal counselor's perspective, there would be a motion needed to bring that back for dialogue amongst the commissioners. And then, again, ultimately, whether or not the commission decided to make a recommendation to council, again, I think is the difference between what again,
I think-
we've looked at recently, which was just more of a topic of discussion,
Okay.
educational, I'll say.
Okay, I'm starting to see the difference, and we're going to test it out in a second. Thank you.
To which I would add, this item agenda 10, items from the commission, is a very viable format within which you can test the waters of your concepts and ideas if you wanted to do so before proposing a formal motion to have something changed. I mean, I think that's exactly what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Though we've gone one step further. And on the table, I believe, we've already voted.
No, we didn't vote.
We
We
didn't
just got
vote.
the second.
We vote,
Ready
okay,
to
I
vote.
apologize.
Mhm.
So we have a vote, we have a second. On the table is the opportunity to vote, and I will ask for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Lang.
Aye.
Commissioner Boone.
Aye.
Commissioner Poland.
Yes.
Chair Height.
Aye.
Commissioner Saunders.
Yes.
Commissioner Earl.
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan.
Aye.
Chair, that passes 7-0.
Thank you all very much. Are there other items from the commission? Oh my goodness, the green light is on. Commissioner Saunders.
Informally, I would like to add to an agenda, if it's all right, to look at how packets are put together from planning. I believe this was brought up earlier in January, that it could, how they're put together from staff to commission. Had you brought that up before, Director Penland? Am I thinking that correctly? I'd still like to either way, but.
Again, through the chair, commission member, I believe there was dialogue about the potential to discuss kind of content, format, et cetera. And I guess to answer your question, happy to bring that topic of discussion so that we could explore, again, the way that we handle it now, if there's things that we could be doing better. I believe Planning Manager Burchett also mentioned, I think that was the day that we discussed. So to shorten that, happy to bring it back as a discussion topic so we can explore, and then if there's specific direction at that time or just input, we could take it at that time.
So that would be an example of an informal request, correct? So we don't need to vote on this.
I don't believe there'd be a formal motion needed. I believe that we would probably want to get concurrence from the commission that we want to talk about that at a future date.
Well,
Then we'd have to do formal. Then we would probably have to do a formal vote.
no,
No?
we don't have to do a formal vote.
All right.
If you are concerned or have issues or want to talk about the packet,
Yeah.
talk about it.
Right now?
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it right now.
Okay.
I'm already past my
So
10
if
minutes.
you,
But I wanted to, get how it's done first, and that we could talk about it.
okay, so if you,
But
Are you-
if it's just me, that's going to be a waste of time for everyone. That's why you would do a formal vote.
well, I still don't think you need a formal
Okay.
vote to ask how the material is being presented. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Penland, that you have heard that the commission has an interest in understanding how, because I think it's been brought up twice now in the last 3 months, if not 2 months, of how is the packet presented, what is it that you think about, and can we dialogue about it to the extent that people want more or different information?
I think I hear the commission loud and clear that you'd like
Okay.
that as a future agenda item to talk about.
Okay, cool. Good enough. Does that help you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
more items from the commission? Why would you do that to me? Thank you very much. Anything from planning? Well, our council representative is not here. So item 12 is items from the planning and development director.
I will be brief. I just wanted to provide a preview of potential upcoming items. One of the items we wanted to bring to Commission's attention is the date of the March. Normal meeting would be March 19th. That does fall on spring break, so one wanted to see what Commission's thoughts were on potentially not having that meeting and shifting it to March 26th. It looks like we do have potential items on March 26th. And we could potentially do a work session on that date as well. So wanted to float that out, see if anybody has any input on that, or I guess if there's conflicts on the week of March 19th.
Confirm me, there are two projects up on the 26th, tentatively,
Tentatively, yes.
plus a work session. I would like to break that up into two if we could. The 19th is not a problem for me. I don't know if it is for anybody else. No, 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 no. So we could do two in March,
Okay.
is what I'm hearing.
Does it work for staff?
I believe it does. What we're not certain of is whether or not we can hit the 19th date with the actual public hearings, but the work session is probably feasible.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other option would be to, since we do have another topic that we could bring back, to have kind of a work session in April on that date if there isn't anything. But it sounds like commission is amenable generally to having the 19th and the 26th.
Yeah, if it works for you guys, I mean, I don't know, if your staff is gonna be gone, then it's gone. I don't wanna
I think
impose.
I think we're good. I'll verify, but I believe that will work for staff as well.
So we make it a work session. We've had a lot of work sessions.
That's good.
Seems like they're growing. Yeah.
Education is good.
Okay, and then we'll have two projects on, oh wow, here's
Sorry.
April. Keep going.
I moved forward. Again, as an option, sorry, we could look at April 16th as well for a work session, but it sounds like March will be okay. And then potentially two tentative items on the 16th as well.
I will say that I find that 2-item agendas are long. I mean, if we split them and then have a training topic and a presentation, that could be easier, possibly, than doing two back-to-back projects. It also depends upon how contentious is the project. But one project seems to eat a lot of time. I
I
mean,
would
we had a
concur.
simple 15-minute project this evening, and we're an hour and a half in.
It was a great discussion. Well, I guess going back to the dialogue for March,
Arrow back, there we go.
thank you. Again, I'll double check with staff, but we may be able to do the two in March, and then again, it would just be potentially one hearing, still tentative for April. Don't know in terms of contention about either of those items for April, but the URA most likely will not be contentious. So again,
These are
very
both
tentative.
variances in March, huh?
In March,
Ah,
the idea would be, or at least the goal would be, to have the commission act as BOA
okay.
the same evening. And we've, at least from a process standpoint, it appears that both of those are aligning so that they could be on the same evening.
Variances do tend to go a little quicker, in my experience. Okay. All right.
I guess as a general inquiry, I know, Chair, you provided your thoughts. Is the preference to try to break up into two meetings versus, again, having,
I think the two variances probably could be okay. Two full meetings on projects that are being reviewed by the commission, probably would be better split up, is my thought.
and would the preference also be to split, if there is a work session item on the horizon, to not have that on an item that has more than one topic, or to have a separate meeting altogether for work session items?
My thought, and I'm gonna open it up for others to opine as well, is that, one hearing and one, other agenda item would be okay. Commissioner Poland.
Is it, so we have potentially 4 meetings over the next 2 months. Could it potentially also be we put the 2 work sessions together in 1 month, so we have 3 meetings instead of 4?
I hear what you're saying. Because 2 meetings a month is a bit of a drag as well.
Right, and I think 2 work sessions are doable in 1 night.
Yep.
We could definitely do that. Based upon timing, it may work out better in April than in March, but either way, we can definitely try to break it up in that fashion.
I'm sorry, certainly.
I'm just trying to follow
Commissioner
along here.
Saunders.
Thank you,
Yep.
Chair Height. So I'm hearing having 2 motionable items on one night might be too extensive if they're contentious. Right? Is that what I'm hearing? And then, but these variances, they're similar, they're potentially short, so they could go well together. But maybe something that's more involved, like the URA, might be better to be a motion item by itself and then have a presentation with it. But you can't have a study session together with a work session.
No, not at the same time, Commissioner. And going back to the, I probably did a horrible job of describing, the URA actually should be fairly simple, pretty simple motion, but I think the intent is to try to minimize multiple contentious items that will be time consuming. Where I was headed was if there was a preference to try to separate the work sessions as well. And I think we landed on if we can potentially have more than one work session on one item or one evening rather, and separate those from, again, what looks like we might have 2 items both in March and in April. So either the March 19th, I guess as a work session, or one of the meetings in April as a work session to cover the topics that have been brought up, which we now have 2, one being the drive-through discussion and the other being the dialogue about, actually, we kind of have 3, but the other being the discussion about a potential code amendment. Did I confuse it even further?
I'm moving on to,
Oh,
I
sorry.
think Commissioner Boone, I didn't know if you were off.
So I may have missed something, but I had it in my original calendar that we were having a work session next week. Are we not meeting next week?
We are not. We were not prepped for next week, so we'll only have this meeting this month.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Commissioner Saunders.
I was going to whisper my question to Chair Hyde, but I think it's better if I ask. So on here on the screen that you have the work session on the 26th and a regular meeting on the 26th, but you're not proposing we do that. You're just saying this is what's coming up and how do we move it around?
Correct.
Okay.
This was a very tentative for discussion purposes, just to see what was coming down the pike.
Okay, thank you.
So is it as clear as mud to you too?
It is. I think my marching orders are one, to see if staff can be available as soon as the 19th for a work session for the items that we mentioned this evening. I don't know yet, I guess secondarily, whether or not the 2 variances will be ready for the 19th. I don't believe they will. So with that being said, it will probably make more sense to have or plan for the 2 hearings of variances on the 26th.
Yep.
And then pick a date in April of those 2 monthly meetings, one being the work session, likely the second meeting of the month, and the traditional regularly scheduled hearing for the potential 2 public hearings.
For 2 public hearings. Yeah, go to April. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
The URA is, you think, relatively easy? As
I'm
opposed to the
very hopeful,
preliminary-
yes.
Right, as opposed to the preliminary plat.
Yeah, the URA is very narrow in scope in terms
Okay.
of commission's review.
Okay. So possibly that could happen without too much sweat in one meeting. Got it.
Yes, and both of those are, I'll still say, very tentative.
Okay. And then possibly, if the 19th works, drop this TBD training topic into it.
Yes.
And you think you'll be ready to talk about a code amendment that quickly?
To have dialogue, I believe
Okay.
so.
All right.
We may have to come back if there are specific questions and, again, comments from commission that we need to explore further, but at least have an initial discussion, I think so.
Okay. And then talking about packet assembly could be done at the end of any meeting, maybe.
I think so.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Anything more? I think I'm going to adjourn.